Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachalamaya Namaskaram. Today I'll start with a question that came to the foundation by email. In fact, two questions in the same email. The first one is, can you give us the breakdown and step-by-step thought process on how an introspection of who am I would look like from the perspective of practitioner? How was your experience as a beginner and after having some experience? What are all the typical challenges one goes through? That's the first question. I'll answer the first question, then come on to the second question. That is the best way of answering this question is to, well, in order, we need to understand what Bhagavan means by self-investigation. Bhagavan has made it very clear, he's given a very clear definition of Atma-vichara in Nana. In the 16th paragraph of Nana, he defines Atma-vichara saying, Sadakalamum manate atma vilvetiruptikutan atma-vichara mendrupaya. That means the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. In other words, what self-investigation is just keeping our mind on ourselves. So that is what Bhagavan has very categorically explained. Keeping our mind on ourselves means keeping our attention on ourselves. To understand what this means, obviously we need to understand what is meant by ourself. Ourself doesn't mean the body or doesn't mean any of the five sheaves. That it means it doesn't mean the body, the physical form of the body. It doesn't mean the prana, the life that is animating the body. It doesn't mean the manas, the mind. That's the mind in the sense of the gross aspects of the mind, the perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. It doesn't mean the intellect, which is a subtler form of the mind, the reasoning and discerning aspect of the mind. It doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean, finally, the what is called the Anandamaya kosha, or otherwise called the chittam, the will. That is the totality of all the vasanas. These are all things other than ourselves. That is, as ego, we identify ourselves with all these five sheaths collectively. But none of these five sheaths are what we actually are, because they are things experienced by us. This body is obviously an object experienced by us. The prana, at least in the most obvious forms of the breathing, is something experienced by us. The grosser functions of the mind, the perceptions, the memories, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and so on, these are all experienced by us. The workings of the intellect, they're objects experienced by us, phenomena experienced by us. And likewise with the vasana, these are all things experienced as objects. So they are not what we actually are. What we actually are is just pure awareness. As ego, we are identified with these five sheaths, but that is, we are aware of ourselves as I am this body, in which the term body refers to all the five sheaths collectively. But though we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, the body consisting of five sheaths is an object. It's something experienced by us. It's a phenomenon. So we are the subject. As ego, we are the subject. So what we have to do is not hold on to, in this adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body, we are trying to hold on to only the fundamental awareness I am. In other words, we're just trying to attend to our own being, because the awareness I am and our being are one and the same thing, as Bhagavan clarified in so many ways. So we are simply attending to our being. That's all there is to it. That is the practice of self-investigation from beginning to end. So there's no step-by-step thought process to explain. Of course, when we are trying to attend to ourselves, our attention keeps on, because of under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas, our attention keeps on going outwards towards things other than ourselves. And whenever it goes out towards other things, we need to turn our attention back to ourselves. This is what Bhagavan described as whenever any thought arises. That means whenever any phenomenon appears, that means our attention has been diverted away from ourselves towards something else. So whenever that happens, to whom do all these things appear? That is what we need to investigate. Investigating to whom do all these things appear doesn't mean asking the question, to whom do all these things appear? It means turning our attention back towards ourselves, the one to whom all these things appear. And once our attention has been turned back towards ourselves, we need to hold on to that self-attentiveness as much as possible. And when it again gets diverted, we again bring it back. So this is a very, very simple practice. The practice is just attending to ourselves. If our attention gets diverted away towards other things, we need to turn it back towards ourselves. So that is the whole process, the whole practice from beginning to end. So how would it look like from the perspective of a practitioner? Well, we are just focusing our attention more and more on ourselves. So the more we focus our attention on ourselves, the more our attention is withdrawn from other things. So the awareness of things other than ourselves recedes into the background, and all that remains is the fundamental awareness I am. That's as much as far as we can explain it in words. Of course, words are not adequate, but this is as much as we can explain. It can be understood only by putting it into practice. The more we put it into practice, the more the clearer it will become to us. Then the next question: how was your experience as a beginner and after some experience? Of course, as a beginner, we are a little bit unsure of ourselves. We stumble around a little, but once we clearly understand that it's just a matter of trying to attend to our own being, we try to do that as much as possible. So it's not, we're not going to get any new experience that is actually all. We are not looking for any experience when we are investigating ourselves. We are looking to know and to be the reality of the experiencer. In other words, the fundamental awareness I am. So there's nothing new to be known. We just need to shed all the false knowledge. And the root of all false knowledge is the false awareness I am this body. And to shed that, we need to simply hold on to our fundamental awareness I am. And then the next question: what are all the typical challenges one goes through? There is actually only one challenge that we face on this path: our lack of willingness to attend to ourselves. That is, if we try to attend to ourselves, we will find that our attention is repeatedly diverted away from other things towards other things. Under some pretext or other, we attend to other things. This is because we are unwilling. We don't yet have sufficient love just to know and to be what we actually are. So we find any excuse to attend to other things. So the lack of love, the lack of willingness to attend to ourselves is the sum and substance of all the challenges. The challenges may take different forms in the sense that different things may divert our attention away from ourselves, but the root cause of our attention being diverted away from ourselves is our insufficient love to know and to be what we actually are. We are more interested in knowing other things than knowing ourselves. So the lack of love is the only is the sum and substance of whatever type of challenge we may go through. This is why Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means love. Jnana means knowledge in the sense of the awareness of ourselves as we actually are. So we need great love to put this into practice, because as Bhagavan says, for example, in verse 26 of Ulunaptu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this is giving up everything. Investigating what this is means investigating what ego is. And if we investigate what ego is, as Bhagavan explained in the previous verse, verse 25, Tedinal otum pidicum, if we seek to know the reality of ourselves, if we as ego seek to know the reality of ourselves, we as ego take flight. That is a metaphor. Otum pidicum, take flight, is a metaphorical way of saying that ego will subside and dissolve back into its source. Because, as he makes clear in that verse 25, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by grasping form. Ego itself is a formless demon. So grasping form means grasping things other than itself. In other words, being aware of things other than ourselves, that is the food on which ego lives. If instead of attending to other things, if we attend to ourselves, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, our attention is thereby withdrawn from other things. So ego will thereby subside and dissolve back into its source. So that's why Bhagavan says, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent will we as ego subside. And when we subside, everything else subsides along with us. So attending to ourselves is itself self-surrender. So until we are willing to surrender ourselves, until we're willing to give up entirely all that we now take ourselves to be, until we're willing to surrender this false identification, I am such and such a person, we will not be willing to attend to ourselves keenly enough to dissolve back into our source. So we need to persevere in this practice, and because persevering in this practice is the only means by which we will cultivate the love to attend to ourselves more and more and more. And that love is absolutely essential, because without love, we will not be willing to surrender ourselves. And without willingness to surrender ourselves, we will not be willing to turn our attention within, because turning our attention within is itself surrendering ourselves. So whatever form the challenges may take, the root cause of all these challenges is only our lack of love to know and to be what we actually are. And that is to the extent to which we have any desire to experience anything other than ourselves, to that extent, our love to know ourselves is diminished. That is, they're inversely proportional. Love to know ourselves and liking to know anything else. So this is why patient and persistent practice is necessary until finally, or until our Vishaya vasanas are weakened to a sufficient extent, and the Sat Vasana, the love to be as we actually are, is strengthened. So once the Sat Vasana becomes stronger than all the Vishaya vasanas combined, then only will we be willing to attend to ourselves keenly enough to subside and dissolve back into our source forever. So that's the first set of questions. The next question is, Bhagavan says be as the ultimate teaching, be in inverted commas. And at the same time, there's an introspection teaching where he encourages us to ask, who am I? Being and introspecting seemingly looks different types of work. What are your thoughts? This is where a clear understanding of Bhagavan's teachings is so necessary. If we clearly understand Bhagavan's teachings, questions like this will not arise. Firstly, Bhagavan never encouraged us to ask, who am I? In fact, he made it clear that asking who am I is a complete misinterpretation of his teachings. He even wrote towards the end of his life in 1947, I think it was, he composed Ekama Panchakam. And in the second verse, he repudiates this idea that self-investigation is asking, who am I? What he says in this verse is, Tan irundum tanaha. That means tan tanaha irundum. Though oneself is always oneself, though oneself always exists as oneself, tane tan nan evan nan irukum tanam edu endru ke panaku. One who asks oneself, who am I? What is the place I am? To such a person, a drunkard who mutters, who am I? What place am I? Is equal to one. Such a drunkard is equal to a person who asks equal to one who asks oneself, who am I? What is the place in which I am? So Bhagavan, in this verse, he makes it very clear. Self-investigation is not simply asking, who am I? The reason he wrote this verse is precisely because so many people misunderstood and thought that we just have to ask, who am I? In fact, if we read books like Talks and other such books, we will see it repeatedly recorded as if Bhagavan said, ask, who am I? Not only in Talks, but also in other books. This is, so Bhagavan knew that there was a widespread misunderstanding. Part of the reason for this misunderstanding is that the noun vicharam and the verb vichari have been translated in English as inquiry and inquire, respectively. That is, the verb vichari has been translated as inquire, and the noun vichara has been translated as inquiry. In English, inquire can be used in two senses. One sense in which we use the word inquire means to ask. If you inquire what is the time, you're asking what is the time. Inquire also means investigate, but it is only in the sense of investigate that Bhagavan uses this term, this verb vichari. In fact, even in Tamil, vichari is often used in the sense of inquire. You can say, convey my inquiries to a certain person, means tell them I'm asking, that I've been asking how they are. So it's also in Tamil, vichari can mean inquire in the sense of ask, but that is not the sense in which Bhagavan used the term. Bhagavan used the term vichari and the verb vichari and the noun vicharam in the sense of investigate. Investigate doesn't mean asking. We need to find out. That's one thing that is there repeated. One good thing in Talks, it's repeatedly recorded, but Bhagavan said, find out, find out. We can't find out what we are simply by asking, who am I? Supposing Bhagavan gives us a book and says, investigate what's written in it, or find out what's written in it. What do? We don't sit there with our eyes closed, asking ourselves, what is written in this book? What is written in this book? If we want to know what's written in the book, what do? We have to open the book and look inside. Likewise, if we want to know who am I, we can't know who am I simply by asking the question, who am I? We need to turn our attention back within and attend to ourself alone. The more keenly we attend to ourself, the more we as ego will subside. And when ego subsides completely, when it's finally swallowed by the infinite clarity of pure awareness, that infinite clarity of pure awareness but swallows ego is itself the answer to this investigation, who am I? So it's not about asking a question, it's about investigating, who am I? And so what is the connection between investigating and being? Very simple. As I explained, well, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludanapu, and he implies this in so many other places, if we attend to our own being, ego will thereby subside. And when ego subsides, where does it subside? It subsides back into our being. So by attending to our being, we thereby remain as we actually are. So when Bhagavan taught us be or just be, when the verb he used for be was in this context was generally iru. Iru means just be. Or he sometimes said summa iru. Summa iru means just be. Summa iru is often translated as be still or be quiet. But the best translation of summa iru is just be, merely be. Just be implies be without rising. So just be as you actually are. So in order to be, we always are what we actually are, but we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are because we have seemingly risen as ego. So it's only by we as ego subsiding and dissolving back into our being, but we can be as we actually are. So the means to be as we actually are is investigating, who am I? So that's why I say, if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, questions like this will not arise. That is, the person who asked the question wrote, being and introspecting seemingly look different types of work. They are not. The only way to be as we actually are is to turn our attention within and attend only to our being. That is, by holding on to our being, we thereby subside back into our being and thereby be as we actually are, thereby remain as we actually are. So this is one of the fundamental principles of Bhagavan's teachings, but investigating who am I is the means to just be. Whereas some people, some would-be teachers or gurus or whatever nowadays, they say, oh, self-inquiry is not Ramana Maharshi's highest teaching. His highest teaching is just be. So you don't have to do anything, you just be. Such people have not understood Bhagavan's teachings at all, because the means to just be is to investigate, who am I? So there's no higher or lower teaching. There's only one teaching. Attending to ourselves, that is all we have to do in inverted commas. But attending to ourselves is not actually a doing. It is a cessation of doing. Because by attending to ourselves, we, the doer, that is ego, subside, and thereby we remain as we actually are. In other words, Bhagavan expresses it beautifully in Upadesha. What he says in Upadesha is, this is when he's in the context of talking about the path of bhakti. He had talked about puja, japa, and dhyana. That is the worship by body and the repetition by speech and the meditation by mind. After talking about those, he then says in verse 8, rather than Anya Bhava, Ananya Bhava, in which he is I, is best among all. Anya Bhava, Anya means other. bhava in this context means a meditation. So anya bhava is meditation on what is other. That means other than ourselves. So what Bhagavan implies by anya bhava is that it's all the devotional practices in which we take God to be something other than ourselves. We take God to be a name and form, and we worship that name and form. That name and form, it seems to be something other than ourselves. That's, of course, good up to a certain point. But if we want to go deeper in the path of bhakti, we need to leave aside this anya bhava and come to ananya bhava. Just like anya means other, ananya means not other. So ananya bhava means meditating on what is not other. What is not other than ourself is only ourself. So ananya bhava implies self-attentiveness. In other words, ananya bhava means the same as atma vichara. And he clarifies what he means by ananya bhava, in which he is I. In which he is I means in which God is I. In other words, when we understand that God is not something external to ourselves, but God is that which is shining in our heart as I, the best way to meditate on God is to meditate on nothing other than I. That is what Bhagavan calls ananya bhava. And that, he says, is anatinam uttamam. It's the best among all. And he says, ananya bhava me anatinam uttamam. That A implies that's an intensifier, but means certainly. This is certainly the best among all. So among all forms of spiritual practice, the best practice is to meditate on nothing other than ourselves, with the understanding that God is that which is shining in our heart as I. So then in the verse I want to particularly talk about is the next verse, because in the next verse, Bhagavan says, Bhava Balatinal Bhavanatita Sabhava Tirutale Undipara Parabhakti Tattvam Undipara. Bhava Balatinal means by the strength of meditation. In this context, it means by the strength of meditation. So what meditation is he referring to? In the previous verse, he said, best among all is ananya bhava. So that is the meditation. So the ananya bhava is the meditation on nothing other than ourselves. So the implication in this verse, what he means by bhava in this verse, is meditation on nothing other than ourselves. So by the strength of such meditation, in other words, by the strength of such self-attentiveness, bhavanatita sabbhavatu irutale. Bhavanatita means which transcends bhavana. Sabbhavatu means the state of being. So the state of being transcends bhavana. Bhavana in this context implies meditation in the form of mental activity. If we're meditating on anything other than ourselves, that is a mental activity. If we're meditating on ourselves alone, that is a cessation of mental activity. So when he says bhavanatita, that implies it is beyond all, or which transcends all mental activity. Satbhava means the state of being. Sabbhava too means in the state of being. Irutal means being. So being in the state of being, which transcends all mental activity. How? By the strength of that ananya bhava, that self-attentiveness, irutale parabhakti tattvam. That alone is the very nature of supreme devotion. So what Bhagavan makes clear in this verse is simply by the strength of our self-attentiveness, we will thereby be in the state of being. Being in the state of being means being as we actually are. And that is the supreme devotion. But why is it supreme devotion? Because that is the state of complete surrender. Because when we attend to ourselves so keenly, but we thereby subside and remain in the state of being, That is giving ourselves entirely to God. That is surrendering ourselves to God, who is our own being. So Bhagavan has made it very, very clear that but attending to ourself is the means to be as we actually are. So if we want to put Bhagavan's teachings into practice correctly, we need to understand very clearly what he is teaching us. If we understand clearly what he's teaching us, 99% of the questions that we ask, we will find the answers already, because they're already clearly implied there in Bhagavan's teachings. So if we want to follow his path, we need to clearly understand what is the path he's teaching us. So for that, we need to study his teachings carefully, think about them deeply, make sense of them, and then we will find whatever questions may arise, we will find the question, all our questions have already been answered in Bhagavan's teachings, either explicitly or implicitly. So many people ask me so many questions. How am I able to answer these questions? Simply by referring to Bhagavan's teachings, because it's so clear that Bhagavan has answered all our questions if we understand his teachings correctly. And if we don't understand his teachings correctly, how can we put them into practice correctly? So understanding his teachings is so important. So it's okay to ask questions when we don't understand something, but more as we go deeper and deeper in the path, we need to find answers for ourselves, both in Bhagavan's verbal teachings, that is in his writings, and in our the greatest source of clarity, that is, Bhagavan's words are very important because they point us in the right direction, but the true clarity comes from within. So to the extent to which we put Bhagavan's teachings into practice, we will understand his teachings. And to the extent to which we understand them, all questions will be answered. And then once we've understood, all that remains is for us to put it into practice. Of course, once we start to seriously put it into practice, then we find out how much we are lacking in love to do this. But in order to get this love, we need to simply persevere in the practice. More we persevere in the practice, the more our Vishaya vasanas will be weakened and our Pasat vasana will be strengthened. Vishaya vasanas means our inclination to experience anything other than ourselves. In other words, inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves. And Sat vasana means the inclination to be as we actually are, to attend to only to our being and not to anything else. So I hope this adequately answers those questions. Are there any questions that have been asked, Shalini?
Yes, there are questions. There's also the question which you sent by email.
Right.
Like me to ask that one first?
Yeah, yes, okay.
Okay. It says that my understanding from Ramana's teaching is to practice, number one, self-inquiry, that is self-investigation, and two, spiritual devotion or self-surrender. According to what I have read and heard, I learned the key point as turning attention back within and meditating on the self and practicing it with perseverance. For the past 7 months, I have been sincerely attempting this practice as much as possible in my daily life. However, like some spiritual practitioners, the more I practice self-investigation and attempt to turn within and attempt turning within, my mind gets burnt out. Instead of subsiding, my ego is getting more selfish and only focusing on myself. It feels like I, the ego, I'm deluding myself as I am not able to feel love and compassion for myself or others. My ego is heading towards apathy and not willing to self-surrender or with devotion, bhakti, as it has become cynical about love and compassion for myself or others. I'm not able to see myself in vairagya, but no, sorry.
No.
I'm not able to see myself in others, and at times doubts arise about Gurudev Ramana's teaching. To consider myself, to console myself, I have tried looking at Ramana's picture and his compassionate eyes, or even visualizing it. At some point, my mind thought it possibly is the nature of this passion, that is vairagya, but now it is very painful to see myself with lack of love and compassion for self or others. It is impacting both my personal and professional interpersonal relationships and social skills. It clearly appears my practice is incorrect. I would be thankful if you could please guide me with the grace of Gurudev's teachings.
Yes, it does seem that the practice is incorrect, because if we are attending to ourselves correctly, that is, if we are attending only to our own being, to the extent to which we attend to our being, to that extent ego subsides. And to the extent ego subsides, the very opposite of what is described here, it will happen. We won't become more selfish. We will become less selfish, because we will be being selfish means being concerned about the person that we take ourselves to be, attaching more importance to this person than to any other person, thinking this person's interests are more important than any other person's interest. That is what is meant by selfishness. So selfishness is born out of ego. So if we are attending to our own being, ego will thereby subside, and all its selfishness and lack of love and compassion will subside along with it. So again here, the answer to all these questions lies in understanding Bhagavan's teachings correctly. Though Bhagavan sometimes said there are two ways: either investigate yourself or surrender yourself. He also made it clear that the means by which we can surrender ourselves is by self-investigation. But at the preliminary stages, self-surrender begins in the path of bhakti. So self-surrender may begin at the stage where we still take God to be something other than ourselves, and therefore want to surrender ourselves to God. But as we go deeper in the path of bhakti, we will get the clarity to understand God cannot be something other than myself. If God was something other than myself, God would thereby be a limited God. But God is by the very definition of God is infinite. So how can anything be other than God? So God is my own being. God is what I actually am. Once we understand that, how to surrender ourselves to God? By surrendering ourselves to our being. And how to surrender ourselves to our being? Only by attending to our being. The more we lovingly attend to our being, the more we thereby subside and merge back into our being. So if we understand this correctly and put it into practice correctly, attending only to our being, there'll be no room for the rising of ego, or for that is, there can't be selfishness without ego. The one who is selfish is ego. So by attending to our own being, we are cutting the very root of all selfishness and lack of compassion and lack of love. That is ego. To the extent ego subsides, the love and compassion that it's our own real nature will automatically shine forth. So if someone feels like they're becoming more selfish or more, when he says, I'm becoming more selfish and focusing on myself, what is implied here by focusing on myself is not focusing on our being, but focusing on the person we take ourselves to be. That, of course, so long as we are only concerned about this person, we are not going to be willing to turn within to find out what we actually are. So we need to. This is where vairagya is so important. Of course, bhakti and vairagya, they're two sides of the same coin. To the extent to which we have love to know and to be what we actually are, that is bhakti, we will automatically, our interest in knowing or experiencing anything other than ourselves will diminish. That diminishing of that interest in anything other than our being, that is vairagya. So these two are essential. And we can go deep in this practice only to the extent to which we have bhakti and vairagya. In Nana, Bhagavan gives the analogy of pearl divers who tie stones to their waist in order to sink deep enough into the ocean to retrieve the pearls lying at the bottom. That the stone that is there analogous to well, in that context, he says vairagya. But of course, you can't have vairagya without bhakti. You can't have bhakti without vairagya. The two go hand in hand. So to the extent to which we have love for our being, we will be free of desire from other things. That freedom from desire for other things is what is called vairagya. So bhakti and vairagya are two sides of the same coin. So that love to know what we actually are and freedom from any inclination, any interest, any desire to know or experience anything other than ourselves, that is essential. So how to cultivate that love and vairagya? Only by persevering in the practice. But the practice has to be correct practice. We have to be attending only to our own being, not to anything else. So I can only infer from from the wording of this question that as this person wrote at the end, it clearly appears my practice is incorrect. Yes, it does seem that the practice is incorrect. If we are attending to our own being more and more and more, we will thereby be subsiding. And to the extent to which we subside, all selfishness will subside along with us, and compassion will naturally will naturally arise in our heart, because that love, that all embracing love is our very nature, because the true love is the love for being. And the more we subside in being, the more we will see being everywhere. So we by dissolving ego through the practice of self-investigation, we are thereby dissolving the barriers between self and other. This is myself, all these are others. That distinction dissolves to the extent to which ego dissolves, and ego will dissolve to the extent to which we attend to ourselves. So I hope this is an adequate answer to that question.
We have a number of questions, a couple of
Right.
them. The first one is, Dear Michael, it is always fascinating to me when people share their unique experiences of being in the presence of Jivan Muktas, especially Bhagavan, especially like Bhagavan. Please share some of your unique experiences living with Sadhu Om. What was it like to spend 8 years with the Jivan Mukta, learning directly about the ultimate truth of reality?
I will answer this with a story, which may at first seem to be not so directly connected, but it's important to understand this principle because this is a very fundamental principle of Bhagavan's teachings. There was a devotee of Bhagavan called Janaki Mata. She lived in Tanjore and she often used to visit Ramana Ashram. During one of her visits to the ashram, one day she saw Bhagavan returning from the Gosala. The Gosala means the cow shed. Bhagavan often used to go there to see Lakshmi and the other cows. So that day he was returning from a Gosala, And he was followed by just one or two attendants, so there weren't many people about. So Janaki Mata thought to herself, oh, this is a very nice opportunity. So she approached Bhagavan, she prostrated at his feet, she put her forehead on his feet, and she held his ankles. And obviously Bhagavan had to stop. So Bhagavan looked down at her with a smile and asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm holding the feet of my guru. And Bhagavan said, this body is perishable, these feet are perishable. If you take this body to be Guru and these feet to be the feet of Guru, you will be disappointed. The Guru and Guru's feet is what is shiny in you as eye. Hold on to those feet, they alone will save you. Why this story is important, it illustrates the nature of the Jiva Mukta. If we approach the Jiva Mukta will never say, come to me, I will give you salvation. The nature of the Jiva Mukta is always to tell you, look within, you are already liberated. See yourself and see that you're ever liberated. So we shouldn't attach, if it is our destiny, we may spend some of our life in the company of Jiva Mukta, but if we are to be truly benefited by being in the company of a Jiva Mukta, we need to understand what they are teaching. And a true Jiva Mukta will not be teaching us, look outside. They'll be teaching us, look within, look within. So, yes, I was, by Bhagavan's grace, I had that good fortune to be 8.5 years in the company of Sadhu Om. It's Sadhu Om was outwardly he was very, very simple. He seemed just like just some simple ordinary devotee, and he was very humble. And but being in his company for those 8 years, of course, when he suddenly left the body at just the age of 63, I was devastated. I felt like an orphan. But with time, I came to understand that what I had, by Bhagavan's grace, imbibed during those 8 years is something that can never be lost. So by being in the company of Sadhu Om, I would say 2 things I gained, but those 2 things in essence actually are one. That is one thing, Sadhu Om had all-consuming love for Bhagavan. So, and his love for Bhagavan was infectious. So it's not possible to live in the company of Sadhu Om without being infected by his bhakti. So I would say that my love for Bhagavan, of course, when I first came to know about Bhagavan, his teachings, I was automatically attracted to him. But my love to Bhagavan, for Bhagavan, was to a very, very great extent deepened by that good fortune of being with Sadhu Om for those 8.5 years. That's one thing, is the love. The other thing is the clarity. Sadhu Om had such a clarity on Bhagavan's teachings. Whatever question he was asked, he could effortlessly answer. And I questioned him relentlessly for 8.5 years. And one thing I learned while questioning him is the deeper the questions, the deeper the answers. Because often I would ask things, and as I came to understand things more deeply, I would ask deeper questions. And then sometimes I would listen to Sadhu Om answering other people's questions. And sometimes some of the answers he gave to me didn't seem very satisfactory because he'd given me a much deeper answer than that. So I would sometimes ask him, but you explained to me like this. Why do you explain to them like that? Then Sadhu Om says, but the teaching, as Bhagavan explained, the teaching has to be according to the taught. So depending on the questions that are asked, different levels of answer are appropriate. So if you give the deepest answers, people are not going to understand it. So you have to give an answer that is intelligible to them at their level. So I mean, so many things I learned from him, but generally I'd say, I mean, when he left the body, as I say, I was devastated. I thought I've got so many questions still to ask, but I haven't asked. But over time, I came to understand that all the questions that I would have liked to have asked him, the answers to those questions already there in Bhagavan's teachings. So then I understood that by being with him for 8 years, a process had started. And once that process has started, it won't stop. It can only deepen and deepen. So it's now nearly 85. Well, next year will be 40 years since Sadhu Om left the body. But it's I have continued to understand Bhagavan's teachings more and more deeply since then. But I would say the catalyst that started this process was being in the company of Sadhu Om. But now I mean, by being with him, I came to understand that all the answers that we need in terms of understanding, we can get from Bhagavan's words. But the real understanding, the real clarity, comes only to the extent to which we go within. So Bhagavan gave me that opportunity of being with Sadhu Om for 8.5 years. And then all of a sudden he took that opportunity away. But that, just as giving me Sadhu Om's company was an important part of the process, taking away that company was also an important part of the process. Because one thing Sadhu Om often used to tell me, when you plant a young tree, you plant a stake beside it and you tie it to the stake for support. But when the tree grows bigger, you have to cut that tie. You have to let the tree grow on its own. The stake is no longer necessary. In fact, if you keep the tree tied to the stake, you're restricting the growth of the tree. So a time comes when you have to remove the tie and throw away the stake. Let the tree stand on its own. So Bhagavan does the same. Early on, he may give us support, but later on, he seems to take away that support. But that is just like the support was necessary to help us grow, taking away the support is equally necessary to help us grow. So I hope that's an adequate answer to that question.
Beautiful. Thank you.
The next question is, you recently stated that truth is not a matter for democracy. It seems to me that any ideologue or fundamentalist or fanatic could make a similar claim. Could you tell me how to distinguish the truth of Bhagwan's system from competing similar claims? What gives you the certainty that Bhagwan's path and Bhagwan's path alone is true? Thank you. Namo Ramana.
Okay, the simple thing is Bhagavan gives that certainty. There are many things about Bhagavan's teachings that give us that certainty. Of course, not everyone will be attracted to Bhagavan, but if we're attracted to Bhagavan, just by being Bhagavan, he gives us supreme confidence. We can't, if we've been attracted to Bhagavan, we can't doubt the truth of what he says. Just because it's Bhagavan, it has to be true what he has taught us. That doesn't mean everything Bhagavan says is equally true, because Bhagavan obviously gives teachings on different levels. But as far as his deeper teachings is concerned, as far as his core teachings is concerned, the teachings he gives us in works like Uludunapadu, Nana, Upadeshundya, Anmavidde, Arunacha Stuti Panchakam, and so on, if we think about his teachings carefully, they are so clearly correct. That is, we can't understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly without seeing how what he says has to be true. That is, Bhagavan doesn't actually ask us to believe anything that we do not know. In fact, Bhagavan often used to say, do not believe what you do not know. So Bhagavan's teachings are based, that the way he presents his teaching is based on an analysis of our own experience. Not just our experience in this waking state, but our experience in all the three states, waking, dream, and sleep. If we analyze these things and think about it deeply, in the light of Bhagavan's teachings, it is very, very, words are inadequate to say it, but I mean, these things have to be experienced. We have to, if we really think about Bhagavan's teachings and really understand what he's saying, it will be obvious to us that what he's saying is correct. But even more important than that, reading his teachings attentively and making sense of them, that is, the Sravana and the Manana, are very, very important. But more important than these is the Nididhyasana, the actual practice. The more we put it into practice, that is, our practice will confirm all that we can learn from Bhagavan's words. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. It's by putting it into practice that the real deep and abiding certainty comes. But we are on the right track. We may not yet have know ourselves as we actually are, but we're heading in the right direction. And we are fortunate to have the supreme and all-loving guide, Bhagavan. So these are things. If we say this to people who don't understand Bhagavan's teachings, who aren't attracted to Bhagavan, this will just be gibberish. It will make no sense. But those of us who have been attracted to Bhagavan and attracted to his teachings and who have understood his teachings clearly, there really is no room for doubt. Such a strong conviction Bhagavan gives us, by his grace, of course. I mean, it's his grace, but we're only by his grace, but we're able to understand. By his grace, but we're attracted to him. It's by his grace, but we're able to understand these things. And it's by his grace only, but we can put them into practice. I don't know whether that's an adequate answer. Some people may say that's adequate. Some people may not find it adequate, but that's the best answer I can give.
And the next one is being without leaving the self, in quotation marks, being without leaving the self, and ahimsa, non-violence, go together. My current understanding is that ahimsa is a byproduct of the practice of not letting go of the self. But I wondered how Michael and Bhagavan saw the connection. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Himsa means harm. What is the first harm and the root of all harms? The first harm is our rising as ego. And that is also the root of all other harms. That is, all harm arises only because we rise as ego. Is there any himsa in sleep? Are we doing any harm to anyone in sleep? Is anyone doing any harm to us in sleep? No, because neither we as a separate person nor any other person as a separate person exists in sleep. In sleep, it's a state of perfect oneness. So it's only when we rise as ego, we see ourselves, the one, as all this multiplicity. And then we have harm and harmlessness, and all these dualities come into existence. So by this practice of self-investigation, we are cutting up a root, namely ego. And when this root is cut thoroughly, then there will be no scope for any himsa at all, because there'll be no two in that state. If there's two, there's possibility of one harming the other. But in a state where there's no two, where there's ekam eva advaitiyam, one only without a second, who is there to harm whom? So if we try to apply ahimsa in the external, in our external behavior, of course we should try to behave in a way in this world, but we cause minimum harm. But it is not possible to live a life of complete ahimsa, because the very existence of one body depends on consuming other things. Like we consume plants, and I mean, we don't have to do more harm by consuming animals. That's obviously wrong. So we try to minimize the harm we do, but we cannot avoid harm completely so long as we rise as ego and thereby take ourselves to be a body. Even our walking, we're probably walking on ants and small creatures in the soil. If we're walking through vegetation, we're probably harming the vegetation to some extent. I mean, it's not. As an embodied creature, we are part of this whole web of life, and the web of life is constantly feeding on itself, so to speak. So there's no such thing as perfect ahimsa in the state of multiplicity. But so long as we experience ourselves as one small part of this huge ocean of multiplicity that we experience, we should try to minimize the harm we do. But if we want to put a stop to all harm forever, we need to we need to put an end to the root cause of all harm, which is our rising as ego. Because by rising as ego, we are seemingly dividing the one indivisible whole into all this multiplicity. And so long as you have multiplicity, you've got tensions, you've got competition. On a human level, we have within families, you have quarrels within countries, you've got competition between different political factions. Between countries, you have wars. All these things are there. And if we see the natural world around us, the world of animals and plants, there's constant competition. When vegetation is growing, it's in competition with all the other vegetation, which is keep competing for the same space and the same air and the same light. So even among plants, there's competition. There's competition among animals. This is just the nature of this. This is the nature of Prakriti. This is the nature of this manifestation of multiplicity. So if we want to put an end to all this, all we need to do is to cease rising as ego, because it is only when we rise as ego that all this multiplicity comes into being. When we don't rise as ego, there is no multiplicity. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulunaptu, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. So if you want to give up all himsa, all harm, all violence, all warfare, all disease, all competition, if you want to put an end to all that, all we need to do is to investigate, who am I? By investigating who am I, we bring about the subsidence and dissolution of ego. And when ego subsides and dissolves, everything subsides and dissolves along with it. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question.
Thank you very much.
The next question is, how can we attend only to our being how can we distinguish our fundamental awareness, I am, from anything else? As ego, I am is always entangled in phenomena.
This is the million-dollar question. I mean, this is what self-investigation is all about. Because by investigating ourselves, we are finding out how to disentangle ourselves from all phenomena. The way Bhagavan has shown us, if you want to disentangle your being from everything else, all you need to do is hold on to your being. Because to the extent to which you hold on to your being, you will let go of other things. And to the extent to which you let go of other things, they will drop off. Because this world is not holding on to us. We are holding on to the world. This body is not holding on to us. We are holding on to the body. So if we want to free ourselves from all this appearance of phenomena, we have to hold on to what is real, our own being. To the extent to which we hold on to our being, we thereby let go of other things, and to the extent we let go of other things, they drop off. So, Drisya Viveka, that is distinguishing the seer from the seen, in practice is only self-investigation. Only by holding on to the seer, we can separate the seer from all the seen. And when the seer, who is ego, is separated from everything else, seer thereby subsides, and the seeing becomes the seer becomes the being. The seer remains as the being that it always actually is.
The next question. So this is a question about dyads and triads. If there is no experience without an experiencer being the ego, how did Bhagavan realize that his direct realization with the divine or the truth is not the experiencer, which is the ego? Or sometimes Michael explains that the words are not enough. You have to have direct experience of it.
Yes, of course, words are not enough, but the words are pointing us in the right direction, and we can easily understand this. That is, dyads and triads. Dyads means pairs of opposites, life and death, bondage and liberation, being and existence and non-existence, knowledge and ignorance, awareness and non-awareness, happiness and unhappiness. All these are pairs of opposites. And the triads, in this context, triad means the triputi, the three factors of knowing anything other than ourselves. When we know something other than ourselves, three things are involved. There's what is known. There's the means by which it is known. There are so many means of knowing. We may know by seeing or by hearing. So that we can know that, in other words, we can know through the five senses. Or we know many things, but we don't know directly through the five senses. We know it by testimony because we've heard it from reliable sources, or we know by means of inference. We can from what we know, we can work out what we don't know. And so there's so many different ways in which we can come to know something. So those are the means of knowing. And there's the knower. So without a means of knowing, there couldn't be anything known. And without a knower, there couldn't either be a means of knowing or anything known. So both everything that is known and all the means of knowing things all depend upon the knower. That is ego. As far as knowing the reality is concerned, there's no triputi in that, because what is real is only pure awareness. Pure awareness can never be an object of awareness. There's no other to know pure awareness. So we can know pure awareness only by being pure awareness. Pure awareness means that that satchit, that being awareness, that is the pure awareness. So awareness and the being are one and the same. So that is the fundamental reality. And we can know that only by being that. So ego can never know the pure awareness, because ego is the impure awareness. I am this body. It's not, but ego is something other than pure awareness. What pure awareness seems to be is ego, in the view of ego. So ego is that pure awareness, I am, mixed and conflated with adjuncts as I am this body. So long as we experience ourselves as I am this body, we do not know the pure awareness that we actually are. When instead of attending to things other than ourselves, we turn our attention back towards ourselves, as Bhagavan did that day in Madurai when that fear of death came to him. What did he do? He simply turned his attention back within. But unlike us, he turned his attention within so keenly that he thereby subsided and dissolved back into pure being, and he remained as pure being. So it was only as pure being that he knew pure being. Pure being and pure awareness means one and the same. So we can know pure awareness only by being pure awareness. So there can never be a case of ego knowing pure awareness. If ego knows something, there's always doubt. But ego can never know pure awareness. However, though ego can never know pure awareness, we as ego need to try to know pure awareness, because it's only by trying to know pure awareness that we will thereby cease to be ego. Because as soon as we as ego turn our attention within sufficiently keenly, we will thereby cease to be aware of anything else, and we will experience ourselves as pure awareness. As soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego and remain at the pure awareness that we are eternally. So if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, there's no possibility that it can be ego experiencing pure awareness, because then pure awareness would become an object of experience and it would depend on ego. That makes no sense at all. Ego is the impure awareness that we seem to be sometimes when people ask Bhagavan, what is the cause for our rising as ego? Bhagavan simply said, avichara. Avichara means non-investigation. In other words, because we're not attending to ourselves, we seem to have risen as ego. But we can't, though Bhagavan put it in that way, we can't say avichara is the cause for the rising of ego, because for whom is avichara? It's only for ego. So but the very nature of ego is avichara. That is why ego can be destroyed only by vichara. Vichara means attending to ourself. Avichara means attending to anything other than ourself. So long as we attend to anything other than ourself, we seem to be ego. If we turn our attention back on ourselves, we will see that we have never been ego. No such thing as ego has ever existed. What actually has always existed is only that pure satchit, and that is what we always are and always have been and always will be. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question.
The next question is, following Bhagavan's teachings, I'm becoming fearless and thereby more vocal at work, challenging ideas I believe are wrong. While I value being a team player and maintaining a positive work commitment, a work environment, I'm also wanting to ensure my expertise is recognized. This outspokenness has led to some colleagues potentially disliking me, something that used to be important to me as a people person. Is this a sign I'm on the wrong path? Is this a sign that I'm on the right path, even if it might mean being disliked by some colleagues?
This is a question about how we should behave in the world. There are never simple answers to how we should behave in the world. As far as external activities are concerned, we need to decide what is important. If there's some great injustice being done, then speaking out may be justified. Sometimes we have to, if we see something injustice happening, we have to speak out against it. But there's some things that may not be as we think it should be, but it really doesn't matter. So we need to, whenever we feel the inclination to be outspoken about something, we need to consider, is this the right thing to do? Is it beneficial for anyone if I speak out? If my speaking out is not going to be beneficial for anyone. For example, there are sometimes when speaking out is going to have no effect at all. I can speak out against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for example. But what good is my speaking out? I mean, we all know it's wrong, but what can we do about it? There's nothing we can do about it. So we need to know when we should speak out and when we should just keep quiet. But all these questions ultimately are questions of dharma. What we should do, what is the proper thing to do, the righteous thing to do. And there never have been and never will be simple answers to questions of what is right and wrong. Because often in life we're in a situation, but if we choose one course of action, it may be good in one respect, it may be bad in another respect. Another course of action will be maybe good in this respect, but bad in that respect. It's often not at all clear how we should act in this world. And ultimately, there's no perfect answer to how we should act in this world. But if we want to follow Bhagavan's teachings, we need not concern ourselves with such questions. In the 13th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, when one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, that means everything that ought to happen, everything that's meant to happen, is being made to happen by that one supreme power that is God. So what all karyas includes not only what should happen in the external world, what we ourselves should do. We will be made to do what we should do. So, as Bhagavan says in that sentence, when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? In other words, let's not be overly concerned. Obviously, we shouldn't behave. Bhagavan is not saying you can behave in any way you like. That is not what he means. The whole point is not rising to have likes and dislikes and want to behave in this way or that way. We should surrender ourselves completely. Things are going to happen as they're meant to happen. And in the next sentence, he gives the beautiful analogy of a passenger on the train. If you're traveling on a train, everything on the train is being carried by the train, including you and your luggage. So there's no need to suffer by carrying your luggage on your head. But so you can judge whether you suffer carrying the luggage on your head or put the luggage aside and let the train carry it. The train is carrying it whether it's on your head or on the seat beside you. So likewise, what is going to happen in this world is going to happen. Things are happening as they're meant to happen. If we are meant to behave in a certain way, we will be made to do that. Because as Bhagavan said in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother, in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that, being there will cause the dance. He who is for that means God or Guru, the one who has allotted the prarabdha. He will make us act in accordance with our prarabdha. When he says in accordance with our prarabdha, what he means is prarabdha is what we are given to experience. It's a fruit of our past action, but not a random selection of a fruit of our past action. God has selected which fruit of which past actions should be experienced by us in which way, but will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So for each life, we are allotted a certain prarabdha. That's a certain set of things that we have to experience. But in order to experience all that we have to experience, certain actions are necessary on our part. For example, if we are to become a scientist, we need to study and pass exams and everything. Then only we can be a scientist. Or if we want to, that's about big things in life. Or if you want to, eat something, we need to take the food and put it in our mouth. So if it's our destiny to eat that food, we will be made to put it in our mouth whether we want it or not. If we are destined to become a scientist, we will be made to study whether we want to or not. So those actions that are necessary in order for us to experience our prarabdha, those actions will be made to do by God. That's what he means by he who is for that will cause to dance. And he says, he who is for that, being there. There means in each place. That implies in the heart of each of us. So he will make us act in whatever way is necessary for us to experience our prarabdha. Many people misunderstand this to mean all our actions are therefore actions we are made to do by God. That is not so, because if all actions were actions we are made to do by God, then God will be the doer and God should experience the fruit. What we're experiencing now is the fruit of our past actions. So if we were made to do those past actions, why should we experience the fruit of them? So at the same time as we are being made to act in accordance with our prarabdha, we're being made by God to act in accordance with our prarabdha, we are also acting under the sway of our own vasanas. Those actions we do under the sway of our vasanas are what yield fruit, but it gets stored and for us later to experience as prarabdha. So in the next sentence, Bhagavan, of that note he wrote for his mother, Bhagavan says, Endrum naduvadu, envichikanum naduvadu. That means whatever is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. So you can want to achieve, you can want to experience anything you like to experience. You can try to experience it, but you cannot experience it unless it's in the prarabdha already. And then in the next sentence, he said the other side, what is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. So if we're destined to experience something, we can want to avoid it, we can try to avoid it, but however much we want to avoid it, however much we try to avoid it, we cannot avoid it. Iduve tinnam, this is certain. Ahalin monamai nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. Being silent means what? It doesn't mean not doing anything, because whatever we have to do in accordance with destiny will be made to do. Being silent means not rising as ego with the sense of doership. I will do this, I must do this, I must do that. So all Bhagavan's teachings come down to what is necessary on our part is only to subside. And the means to subside is self-attentiveness. And that subsidence of ourself as ego is itself self-surrender. So let's not be too concerned about these external activities. More and more we've got to withdraw our interest from all these what is right and what is wrong. Of course, that doesn't mean we should do what is wrong. We know pretty much what is right and what is wrong. and we try to avoid the wrong things and do as far as possible the right thing. But we shouldn't be thinking too much about these things, because our main aim should be to turn our attention within and investigate, not doing, but being. That is what is doing is not real. Karma is not real. What is real is only being. So that's why Bhagavan put all the emphasis on his teaching on being. And what he taught us about karma is only to make us understand we need not be concerned about doing. What we need to do will be made to do by God. And anything we do above that is we're just creating trouble for ourselves. So let's not concern ourselves with doing. Let's concern ourselves with being. Who am I? What is this I? Hold on to this I until it subsides and dissolves forever back into its source, which is what that source is our being, which is what we always actually are, but I as it actually is. That is the I that rises and subsides is ego. That is the adjunct conflated I. The being I is the same I, but devoid of all adjuncts. I hope that adequately answers that question. Of course, it cannot, because there's no adequate answer to questions of what we should do and shouldn't do. It'll be an eternal question: what is right action, what is wrong action? But we shouldn't concern ourselves about this, or we shouldn't overly concern ourselves. What we should be concerned about is our being, not about our doing. Yes, sorry, Shalon. Yeah, you were about to speak, and I.
No, I was just dear Michael, today I read the following answer attributed to Bhagavan Ramana, in quotations. To be in one's natural state on the subsidence of thoughts is bliss. If that bliss be transient, arising and setting, then it is only the sheath of bliss, the Anandmaya Kosha, not the pure self. End of quotations. Does this mean that there is a danger of doing Atma investigation wrong by falling in the trap of this kosha, the Anandmaya Kosha? Thank you.
No, because when we are investigating ourselves, we are not investigating any of the koshas. We're investigating our being. So if we hold on to I, we will there go by to the extent to which we hold on to our being, we are thereby letting go of other things. Holding on to our being means attending to our being. Letting go of other things means withdrawing our attention from other things. So the more we invest, the more we hold on to our being, the more all these koshas, all these adjuncts, all these things other than ourselves will drop off. So there is no danger. So long as we're holding on to that is when we are practicing self-investigation. When we're practicing self-investigation, we can get diverted away from the self-attentiveness in either of two ways. Either by allowing our attention to be distracted away towards other things. In other words, we get carried away by thoughts. We get carried away by the awareness of multiplicity. That's one possibility. The other possibility is we fall asleep. But neither of these can occur so long as we're holding firmly onto our being. So some people ask, can self-investigation lead to manolaya? No, it cannot. If you happen to fall asleep while practicing self-investigation, that is because you let go of your self-attentiveness. So long as we're holding on to self-attentiveness, we can neither subside in laya or get carried away by other thoughts. In that context, when Bhagavan says that is the sheath of Ananda, the Anandamaya Kosha, that is referring to laya. But that's one way that is when Bhagavan gives answers, that is, with all these things, there are many different levels of explanation that can be given. So if Bhagavan answered like that, that was the answer appropriate to the understanding of that person. But the deeper teaching of Bhagavan, but in sleep or any other state of Manolaya, we can't even say it the Anandamaya Kosha, because the Anandamaya Kosha is something other than ourself. The Anandamaya Kosha consists of what? It consists only of vasanas. So how come vasanas exist without ego? In a state of Manolaya, there's no ego, therefore no vasana, therefore no Anandamaya Kosha. But at a certain level, that is the way it has to be explained. At a deeper level, it is simply, so long as we are holding on to our being, we will not be carried away by will not be diverted away by thought, and we will not be subside into a state of manolaya. But if our hold on our being gets slackened, either we get carried away by thoughts or we subside in a state of manolaya.
And this is the last question, Michael.
Right.
There are two. It says that when we are lost in a daydream, are we still in the waking state? And the second question is on love, so maybe we can do that afterwards.
Okay. Daydreaming is in the waking state. There is a state, sometimes when we are falling asleep, for example, we can be drifting between sleep and dream. That is, we haven't completely fallen asleep, so we're still partially awake, but dream images will be arising within the waking state, as it were. So sometimes there's not a clear boundary between waking and dream, so that we can often experience in a state where, when we're in a drowsy state, we may be sort of halfway between, we may be drifting from waking to dream and back to waking again. But daydreaming refers to just a reverie. That is imagining a certain situation. That's clearly in the waking state. We're still aware of the, if we think, I mean, we are still rooted in this body. In dream, our attachment drifts from this body to some other body, of course, both bodies are just mental projections, but in a dream, it's another body, but the mind identifies with. Whereas in a daydream, we're still rooted in this body. So the dividing line between waking and dream is often not very clear. But the dividing line between sleep on the one hand and either waking or dream on the other hand is very clear. Either we are asleep or we're in waking or dream. There's no halfway between. But between waking and dream, often we may be, particularly when we're in a very drowsy state, we may be sort of drifting between waking and dream.
The next question is Krish here?
Yes, sorry, I am here.
Yeah, Krish, do you want to just clarify?
Yeah, sorry, I probably didn't write it out correctly. Yeah, so in terms of the self itself, obviously the self is love, unconditional love. But then also when you say we lack insufficient love to turn inwards, so obviously love is defined in two contexts. There obviously absolute love, which is completely unconditional, but then also the love to turn inwards. So how do we define that love to turn inwards? So at a relative level, how would love be defined?
Let's talk about the absolute level first. The absolute level, it is, of course, the love in the absolute level is, of course, unconditional, but it's not, it's more than the fact that it's unconditional. It is undivided love. That is, people, generally we think of love as love for another. But Bhagavan pointed out the simple fact but more than any other thing, we all love ourselves most. Now, because we take ourselves to be this person, we have love for this person, but our real nature is infinite self-love. So the real love is the love in which there are no two. Because so long as you have two, for example, supposing God is something, we take God to be something other than ourselves. We may have great love for God, but our love is divided between our love for God and our love for ourselves, because we can never be without loving ourselves. So if we want to love God fully, the only way to love God fully is to love him as ourselves. And we can love him as ourselves only by knowing him as ourselves. And we can know him as ourselves only by knowing what we actually are. As far as relative love is concerned, that is obviously the love that we have for anything other than ourselves is relative. It's not the perfect love. So we have love for so many things in this world. We have love for the person we take ourselves to be. We have love for our husband or wife, our children, our parents. We have love for maybe we may either love our job or we may hate it. But there's so many things we talk about. But that's all within the realm of vivahara, within the realm of transaction, interaction. The love that is required to turn within is the love for our own being. So to love our own being, we need to give up our identification with this body. So long as we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, we cannot but love ourselves as this person we take ourselves to be. So long as we love this person, we are not focusing all our love on our being. So we have to love our being fully. We need to love our being to the exclusion of all other things. So that is what we are cultivating by practicing self-investigation. That is this path of self-investigation. We are trying to hold on to our being. We can hold on to our being only to the extent to which we have love to hold on to our being. But the more we hold on to our being, the more we are thereby cultivating that love. So as we persevere in this practice, that is, there are two types of vasanas. There's Vishaya vasanas and Sattvasana. Vishaya vasanas are the inclination to experience anything other than ourselves. So all our attempting to find happiness in other things, these are all under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas, our inclination to seek happiness in other things and to experience those other things. Sattvasana is the inclination towards our being. In other words, the inclination to be aware of nothing other than our being. So by holding on to our being, by focusing all our attention on our being, we are thereby strengthening that Sattvasana and weakening the Vishaya vasanas. To understand why this is so, we need to understand the nature of vasanas. From where do vasanas get their strength? Vasanas have no strength of their own. Whatever strength they seem to have is strength that they derive from us, because there are vasanas, our inclinations, so they can't get their strength from anything other than from ourselves. To the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, to that extent that vasana will be strengthened. And to the extent to which we refrain from being swayed by a vasana, that vasana will be weakened. So if we have any, we can see there's any type of inclination, the more we indulge that inclination, that is, the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by that inclination, the stronger and stronger that inclination will become. So if we want to weaken the Vishaya vasanas and strengthen the Sattvasana, we need to refrain from being swayed by the Vishaya vasanas and allow ourselves to be swayed only by the Sattvasana. The Sattvasana is the inclination to attend to our being. So by attending to our being, we are strengthening the Sattvasana, And by attending to our being, we're also refraining from attending to other things. So we are thereby weakening the Vishaya vasanas. So we have to continue trying to attend to ourselves more and more, and thereby strengthen this Satvasana. So as this Satvasana grows stronger and stronger, it will eventually reach a point where it is stronger than all the Vishaya vasanas combined. Only when that is the case will we finally be willing to lose ourselves forever in our being. So we will then turn the full 180 degrees, so to speak. In other words, we will focus our attention on ourselves so keenly that we thereby cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves. When we're aware of nothing other than ourselves, we're then aware of ourselves with pure awareness, and ego is thereby destroyed. And then we lose ourselves in that ocean of love that is our own real nature. Is that a clear answer to your question, Krish?
Yes, Michael, thanks. Yeah, so basically to cultivate the Sattvasana by attending to oneself, that is the highest expression of love from the standpoint of ego.
Yes, that is the highest love. Rather than thinking of it as absolute and relative, it's rather than thinking in those terms, it's better. Am I loving anything other than myself or myself alone? But love for ourself, when there's love for ourself alone, that love, that is the perfect love, because there's no division there in that state of perfect self-love. So we are now trying to wean ourselves off this love for things other than ourselves and cultivate the love for ourselves. Ourself means our being alone. The more we cultivate that love, the more we subside, and eventually we will lose ourselves in that love altogether. As Bhagavan says in Aksharamlai, like ice in water, melt me as love in you, the form of love. Ambu vilalipol, amburuvunilene, anbai karitaral arunachala. So arunachala, our own being, is the fullness of, is the infinite ocean of love, infinite love. And we now are like a small snowflake that has fallen in that ocean. That is, in substance, we are nothing other than the ocean. We're nothing other than the water that constitutes the ocean, that ocean of love. But we are, as it were, a frozen particle of that love, because we have love for things other than ourselves. So it's only by having love for our own being that we can thereby dissolve back into our own being, which is that infinite ocean of love that Bhagavan is referring to in that verse. So that love is Arunachala. Amburu Varunachala. Ambe Shivam. Love alone is Shiva. Love alone is God. And that is our real nature. That is what we actually are. So that is what we need to lose ourselves in.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, and just to say that these satsangs, they play a massive part in helping cultivate that love. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. But most, all these are very nice. These can be these are useful to the extent to which they help us to turn within. But all these are of no use if we do not make that effort to turn within. So turning within is the most important thing. Turning within means turning our attention back to our own being.
Thank
you. Thank you very much, Michael.
Right.
And today we managed to finish very much on time.
Okay.
In a very timely manner. And thank you everyone for your questions. And we can close with Bhagwan's mantra. We can do this together at home. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.